hello there, I didn't see you. Hi there, it's me, Christine, and Mr. Krabby. He is here to accompany me in filming this video because I'm too nervous to film it by myself, so it's nice to have something large and plush in your lap. Today I'm here with a second video. I didn't know if there was going to be a second video because after I posted my first one, I just had a bunch of ideas for videos, but I never felt passionate enough to fully research and pursue them. It's a lot of work to kind of sit down in front of a camera and then edit the video and post it. And then I'm just imagining all the people watching and how terrible it's gonna be. But anyways, I recently came across this album that absolutely blew my mind and I can't not do a video about it. It literally just came out a couple weeks ago, so basically I'm really on trend. I think this album is absolutely amazing. It's probably my favorite album right now. I know I said that about Magnolia by Randy Houser, but that phase kind of wore off and that album lost its appeal on me a week later. And I think this one is way better. And I think it's way more interesting to talk about because this is just such a cool musical record. If Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance became an album, a country music album, it would be this one. If you don't know what Hillbilly Elegy is, it's this book. It's a memoir written by a guy who grew up in Appalachia and talking about his whole upbringing and how difficult it was living as a poor, rural, white person in the South. And then this guy becomes successful and rich and now lives in San Francisco. So it kind of became popular amongst liberals in the wake of the Trump election. People in liberal California were how are there actually people out there who support Trump? And then this book came out being yes, this is how these people think and how we can relate to them better. So anyways, I actually really enjoyed reading that book. I love learning about this culture of the rural white working class in the South. Their music is my favorite kind of music. I've been obsessed with country music for years now and I just strongly relate to it even though I'm Asian and from California. So this guy Charles, I was stalking him online and I might post this video on his wall, so if you're watching this, hello, I'm a big fan. He is from West Virginia, and I think he might live there still to this day. So I think it's kind of an ode to West Virginia and the larger Appalachia. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't know if it's Appalachia or whatever, but it's kind of a deep appreciation for and a realistic description of Appalachia and what life is like there, what it used to be, and what it is now. Let's just dive into the album and see where it goes. The first song is called Windmill Keeps on Turning, where windmill is in parentheses. So right away, I love so many things about this song. The first is its rhythm. I really like how strong and powerful the rhythm is for this song. It reminds me of your typical outlaw country song, very defiant and powerful and dark and menacing, I'm gonna take on the world and no one's gonna stop me. It kind of reminds me of the song Outlaw State of Mind by Chris Stapleton, which is one of my favorites of his. I think it has a similar feel, a similar pounding rhythm. The second thing I really like about the first verse is just this beautiful image of a windmill. This windmill rising above the town, spinning, turning over and over, watching over the people. It's kind of a symbol of the town's spirit. And but it gets really dark where the narrator goes, hey windmill, one day you'll fall just like the rest of us. I love how dark and creepy and foreboding that is. So a windmill is kind of a symbol of industry and of the factories of Appalachia that became closed down over time when all our jobs went to China. Just kidding, they were automated by machines. As a nerd, I really appreciate the image of a windmill because yay for renewable energy. I really like how the song continues to build upon its imagery. You kind of find out a little bit more about the narrator. He's actually this like homeless guy living on the side of the road selling firewood. He lives in a cardboard box. But then the narrator is just really grateful for what he has. He expresses all these like positive sentiments of how awesome life is despite these conditions. My favorite line at the end is, all the dancing leaves in the breeze can help you forget it all. And you know, this song in general is very dark, but it has this kind of hopeful twist at the end. And whether that hope is ironic or not, I'm not sure. I think it can be interpreted both ways. But me as an optimist, I see it as, you know, life can be hard and life can be tough, but sometimes you just have to be grateful for what you have and see the positive sides. Now we're moving on to Coal Country. The title clearly indicates that this song is about Appalachia, which is known for coal. I fell in love with this song very early on. I really like its soft acoustic feel, and in his voice you can hear a lot of longing. So I think this song is actually very hopeful. On one hand, it portrays this image of decline and forgotten dreams and abandoned factories, but at the same time it's kind of a tribute to Appalachia's former glory, and it praises all of these achievements that came out of Appalachia. It honors it, it appreciates it. It's very grateful and triumphant and hopeful. So I just wanted to finish up Coal Country because the camera died. I feel like YouTubers always say that as an excuse, and I didn't realize it was a real thing until it just happened to me. Okay, so Coal Country, the last thing I wanted to say is that I just really like the instrumentation of it. You've got the fiddle, you got the steel guitar, you have the keyboard, and it all just sounds so good together. Alright, Hardwood Floors. Wow, this song is effing awesome. So when you first start listening to the song, you might be misled into thinking it's just another one of those slow, sad ballads. But all of a sudden, it gets really fast. The first time I listened to it, I was definitely like caught off guard when the tempo suddenly sped up after the first verse. I was like, whoa, what just happened? I thought this was gonna be like a really slow song. And it's so awesome how fast it gets. There's just so much energy and passion and movement, and it just makes me want to dance. I would argue that this is both the most upbeat and the most happy song on this album. There's really no darkness. It's so light and airy and happy and exciting. I think the instrumentation is amazing. There's fiddle, there's drum, there's steel guitar. There's just a really interesting dichotomy as well between the slow, sad sections of the song and then the upbeat, exciting, giddy, passionate sides of the song. I think having them both in there, like it starts out slow, gets fast, gets slow a little bit again, and then gets fast again, it creates this contrast that makes the fast part seem even faster, and it's just so exciting. I really love this song very much. Seneca Creek. This is contender for one of my favorite songs on this album. Wow, this song gives me so many chills when I listen to it. I think it's such a beautiful, beautiful story, and it's just a great example of what country music can be. And I read a lot of literature on country music. I know that sounds really nerdy, but I listen to lots of podcasts and like stuff like that, and I think one common thread that holds country music together is storytelling. Like even Shane McAnally, the guy who writes like all of the pop songs on country radio, agrees that country music is about storytelling. Like that's why he says Sam Hunt can be country, because at least he's telling a story. But anyways, this is, to me, storytelling at its finest. And the story is just so good. It's like actually an interesting story. You learn from the first verse that this guy back in the spring of 1949 was just going about his merry way and saw a girl in a creek, bathing in a creek, which is kind of creepy. Like, why would you just go up to a girl bathing in a creek? But maybe it was 1949 and that's what people did, and that's how you met, because there wasn't Tinder yet. Then they got married and he built her a house right by this creek, Seneca Creek, also the title of this entire album, Seneca. And then he goes off to war. He returns to his hometown, back to his love, Ruth, and he says, let's build us a home. Sorry, I fucked up the story. He didn't build the house yet until he gets back from the war. So, sorry about that. The first chorus of Seneca Creek is very hopeful and future thinking. Like, hey love, I know we have nothing right now, but I have this dream, I have this American dream of building a life together and building our own home by Seneca Creek and raising a family and just being happy. And as we progress through the next verse, the next two verses, we kind of go through an entire lifetime. We go through all the different trials and tribulations that someone might experience in their life, and that kind of parallels nature and what goes on with the creek. Like, we have winter and summer, and we have this flood that like takes out the other side of the creek, but the house that they built remains standing, and that to me is a metaphor for how strong their love is. And finally, we fast forward to 1994, which happens to be the year that I was born, exactly 50 years from the start of the song. It's kind of cool how music gives you the power to time travel. Where she's sick and she dies, and then, sorry for all the spoilers, she is buried on a mountain overlooking Seneca Creek. And when the second chorus comes in, I just like want to cry tears of bittersweet mixed emotion, because it's like happy and sad at the same time. Where he goes like, we built ourselves a home by Seneca Creek, and raised ourselves a family, and we had everything that we ever needed. And that's a contrast. Now we're using past tense, which is a contrast to the first time we heard the chorus when it was in future tense. And it's just so beautiful how they had these dreams and then they achieved those dreams, and it has such a happy ending, and it just feels very wholesome and complete. I also really liked the instrumentation in this song. There's a banjo that comes in kind of halfway that adds a lot of like emphasis and rhythm, and there's some really good steel guitar. I think it's a really cool exploration of humans' relationship with nature and how their whole entire life revolves around Seneca Creek. This is a really lovely song, and maybe a little biased because I really like strawberries. They are one of my favorite fruits. I think it is just a really beautiful, light, cheerful, upbeat song. The lyrics are very whimsical and creative and imaginative. I think it's a really creative take on just like your traditional love song, but it has these images of like olden Europe times, and he's like a subject and she's the queen, and it's really fun, but the song itself, it just makes me really happy. It's definitely a mood booster. Alright, so I actually fell in love with the song quite early on because of its intriguing title. It has a really cool, funky groove, and I think it kind of stands out musically in terms of sound a little bit more than the rest of the album, but I think that's totally cool. It kind of reminds me of Parker Millsap, who is like this Texas alt country artist that I really like. The instrument that stands out to me is the steel guitar. I think that's a steel guitar. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I'm kind of new to this whole instrument thing, but I think it really has a moment in this song, that like twangy, like I can't even do it. It definitely feels more of like a rock song, like a country rock. And I think the meaning of the song is really interesting if I'm interpreting this correctly. He says at the end of the chorus, "These songs save me a fortune on drinks and pills." And I think it's about being a musician, and he's able to use music as a source of emotional healing and therapy. So he doesn't need to see a psychiatrist or take prescribed medication because he has music. And that's kind of cool. When I first saw the title, I thought it would be about an apple for some reason, but it's not. It's actually about an outlaw on the run who gets shot and killed. Sorry for the spoilers, but he dies at the end of it. But I think it's a really, really beautiful song despite the grim topic. I actually love songs about outlaws. I love outlaw country so much, and it's a weird fascination for me because I'm clearly not an outlaw. Like, I am an Asian female studious person who like works at a tech company in Silicon Valley, but I really resonate with the stories of outlaws, and maybe I try to imagine myself as an outlaw in my head because I theoretically like breaking rules and not following the rest of society. But I have a story about an outlaw, and he's just running away from the cops, and then at the end they corner him, but he decides, like, you know what, I'm gonna go out with a bang and I'm gonna make this memorable. So he like blows up this entire hill, and like there's this imagery of like lightning and fire exploding into the sky, and I think that's really cool. But the music really matches it really well, whereas the music builds up to this climax, it ends so triumphantly. Like, these brass instruments come in and it just feels so like powerful and triumphant, and as we build up to that climax, there's a really cool like keyboard and like steel guitar. The sound of the song is really happy and hopeful and uplifting despite it being about death. And then like at the very end of the song, it goes back to being this like quiet, calm state, and there's some humming in the background, and it was kind of unexpected because I thought the song was over, but then there was more. But it was kind of this really nice reflective state, like, oh, this is the calm after the storm. He's dead now. This song made me cry. It made me, like, I was listening to it yesterday and it gave me so many chills, and then tears started coming out of my eyes and I had to use a lot of tissues. Like, it literally is so beautiful and sad and emotionally moving. Like, I've never felt this way about a song before. So this might be my favorite song, to be honest. And it's such a beautiful, another beautiful instance, like Seneca Creek, of storytelling the way country music should be. It goes through the entire backstory of the narrator's life in just the first 2 verses, and it doesn't have a lot of words. Like, it's very concise, but the words are so carefully chosen that it paints the most beautiful image of a life. And I think that's done through specific details. I think that's what makes music, country music specifically, really, really compelling. The use of specific details. The first verse I love so much. I think it's just gold star poetry. I ran these hills since the day I could stand, and I worked the mines since the day I turned 10. We got married and danced to Canon D, and I held our baby with your eyes at 17. So, you know, it's this guy's entire life story, and, you know, he's a coal miner, and he marries this woman at 17 and they have a baby. And then the next verse goes, I kissed you goodbye underneath the December sky. Then I walked to work, to the mine, that day, and then he dies. And, sorry, I shouldn't laugh about death, I'm sorry. And in verse 2, he dies, and the rest of the song is him speaking to her, and saying, I'm sorry for the wait. And I just think that is such a unique take on a song where it's from the perspective of the guy who died. Because I've heard lots of death songs, and they're usually told from the perspective of the person who's left alive singing to the person who died. But this is the opposite. This is the guy who died in the coal mine singing to his widowed wife. And it's just so beautiful and so unique. He's saying, sorry for the wait, and you would think that a song about death would be sad and tragic, but no, it's so hopeful, it's so uplifting. He's saying, don't cry, don't worry, I'm here waiting for you. If you miss me, just yell into the coal mine and you'll hear my voice. I feel like the theme of this this album review is, wow, these songs are really sad and depressing, but I actually find them very hopeful and uplifting. I think that's like every song on here. So the moral of the story is, coal mining is dangerous. Don't try it at home, kids. But also, this is just a really beautiful, hopeful love story in the midst of tragedy. She's just a girl, born in... Every music critic has a least favorite song on an album, and unfortunately, this one is that for me. And I'm not saying it's a bad song, but it's the only one where I didn't have I didn't feel a really strong, deep connection with it, and but that's okay. Like, it's still a really solid song. I love the slow, sad acoustic vibes that it brings out. It's about a girl who has had her heart broken so many times that she now only has half a heart, and she's like, don't break me even more because I am very fragile. There's a line that goes, and the boys in her town seem to take pleasure in mining little hard pieces in her to help them feel alive. And I thought that was really interesting. It sounds a little bit creepy and weird, but it's kind of like a cool mining metaphor, which relates back to Appalachia, the theme of this album. Alright, Pour It On. Great song. It starts out as a very quiet, contemplative reflection on life, but then it kind of builds up into this really powerful climax. It kind of gradually gets more and more upbeat as different instruments come in. You have the drums coming in and then the electric guitar, and you finally get to the chorus and it's so joyful and triumphant, and he's just like, pour it on me! It's very hopeful, and it reminds me a lot of the Christian worship song archetype, and I feel like you always want one of these on your country albums. It's kind of nice because the crowd of people who listen to country music overlaps with those who listen to Christian worship music. And yeah, it feels kind of gospel-y towards the end, where you have all the choir of voices in the background, and he just repeats, pour it on me, pour it on me. So I like it. It makes me feel more alive. So this was also one of the first songs on this album that I discovered on accident and fell in love with, kind of for its raw acoustic feel and how nice his voice is. It feels really deep and resonant and powerful, and the song itself it feels pretty dark and foreboding. I couldn't figure out what it was about at first, but right now my theory is that it's about the people who settled in Appalachia for the first time, like centuries ago, and they were just in this new land, and they called it Eden, and they had to build something new from scratch. And it was hard, but they were committed, and they were like, we see this as Eden, and it's going to be the backbone of America. And there's a line I discovered in verse 3 called, "It's the backbone of a nation with a rhododendron crown." And I looked up rhododendrons, and they are a common flower in Appalachia, so I think I kind of like pieced it together on my own, but please correct me if I'm wrong. So last but not least is Seneca Creek acoustic version. So I don't know if this counts as like a separate song, it's the same song, but it's stripped down without any of the instrumentation. It's just his voice and the guitar. Usually I love stripped down acoustic versions of songs, but I gotta say I probably like the original Seneca Creek better because the instruments add a lot of layers and complexity. That being said, I still really like this version. It's a little bit more dark and foreboding because it has none of those instruments in the back. I think it really brings out how wonderful Charles's voice is. I think you can hear it better, and how beautiful, deep, and rich your voice is. I feel like I'm speaking to you now. It kind of reminds me of like a higher pitched Culture Wall or Chris Stapleton. This is a really, really awesome album where I love every single song on it. I feel like it is just so deep and cuts to the core of my emotions. It made me cry, it made me think, it made me laugh. I don't know if it actually made me laugh, but it made me like amused by just the way certain things are phrased and certain ideas are explored. I feel like it gives me a greater appreciation for the Appalachian part of America, and yeah, just a new respect for it and the people and the culture and the stories that are associated with it. I really appreciate that. I'm such a big fan of this album. I'm excited to see what comes next. If you made it all the way through to the end, please leave a comment in the bottom saying your favorite color, because why not? And I'll see how many people actually made it to the end, which I don't think is going to be more than like 3, but we'll see. Alright, thanks for watching. Bye!